Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets prepare for a Friday night game with Chicago and the beginning of the inaugural in-season tournament. We take a look at key categories across the NBA landscape where Brooklyn is among the best. Positive signs all around as the Nets try to get back healthy and get more wins under their belt.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And Doug, coming off of the epic comeback in Miami, getting to 500, in-season tournament on the rise, we also have a little reminder here. The Brooklyn Nets aren't just a fun story. They're also one of the better teams in the league by several key statistical categories.
Yeah, and some of the stats that you drummed up a couple of these and got a pretty good response for it. And some of these stats, frankly, are things that we were worried about or the Nets have not been great at in the past. that had been stats that had given us agita around whether or not the team was ever going to be able to perform in certain statistical categories. To some degree, or to a lot of a degree, some of these are getting solved this season, even in sort of unexpected ways when you consider some of the guys that have been out of the mix so far for Brooklyn. So really cool to see. I know you're going to start throwing some of these out.
You better believe it. So there was 4 key categories that I looked at, and there's actually individual performances here that we can talk about as well. 3-point shooting is going to be something I want to get to. 118.8 points per game. That's 8th in the NBA, Doug. There's no world that any Nets fan, even the most bullish ones such as myself, thought the Nets could be a top 10 team in scoring this season. 50.1, that's the field goal percentage. 4th in the NBA through the first 4 games of the season. And that includes some players struggling in their shooting performances. This is one that we thought Ben Simmons could certainly have a high impact on if healthy. 28 assists per game. That's 3rd in the NBA. And last but not least, 47.5 rebounds per game. Top 10, 9th in the league. Those are I think the bookends of that are the most surprising and exciting. Being top 10 in scoring and top 10 in rebounds. Those are 2 things that have not gone hand in hand with our perception of what this team could be this year.
And I'll take you even one step further. We'll start with the scoring. That's points per game, which actually the Nets, you could even say they're doing a little bit better than some other teams here because they don't have overtime games under the belt. The scoring is going to count some overtime games, of which there have been a few, not many so far this season. But if you look at just overall offensive efficiency, the Nets rank 5th right now in the league at 115.2. So that's just going to go per possession and smooth things out. It doesn't matter if you played, a billion overtime games. Like your efficiency is just going to be your efficiency. And the only teams that are above them right now, Boston. Okay. Well, you like that, by the way, Boston's like so far above everybody. Then Dallas, number 2, then Philly, number 3, Clippers 4, Brooklyn 5. And when you think about that list of the teams that are ahead of them in offensive efficiency, I mean, at least 3 of those teams have championship aspirations this year, or deep playoff runs. Anything short of deep playoff runs would be massive disappointments for those teams. And those teams have basically, I mean, I guess Dallas hasn't had Kyrie, but those teams all have superstars and sometimes more than one, right. like on their team. And the Nets, for as much as we like this team right now, I don't think we can count anyone as into the full superstar category, which makes it even more impressive. Yep. To have this kind of offensive efficiency and to have gotten huge minutes from Armani Brooks and Trenton Watfords of the world and Lonnie Walker playing a ton and things like this, it frankly makes the stat even that much more impressive.
It's actually, too, when you talk about the 118.8 average being in the top 10 and then efficiency being even higher, just to your point, we know there's been some guys, maybe chief among them from a scoring perspective. Cameron Johnson, just 1 game played. Spencer Dinwiddie, 3 games played, but left early in that 3rd game, about halfway through. So when we talk about guys that have produced for them, obviously Cam Thomas has been massive, 28 points per game. but 21 for Mikhail. Armani Brooks shows up for 1, already gives you 17 on that night. 16.7 for Lonnie Walker. Dorian Finney-Smith, 14. 12 for Cameron Johnson, that one game. And this is with, by the way, 118.8, 119 points, with Spencer Dinwiddie only averaging 11 points across those 3 games that he played in, less than 3, full games. 11 points for Trendon Watford bubbling up there. So on down the line you go, right? You have Royce O'Neal, Ben Simmons contributing as well with 7+ points. Like, I think the most encouraging thing about that number 2 is understanding that Cam Thomas, he has been the revelation to start this year, but had a little more sluggish performance in game number 4. They're doing it with everybody contributing in. It just speaks to the depth that we talked about in that post game coming out of the Miami win. It's going to have to come from more than, the 2 superstars at the top. The Nets don't have that recipe like a lot of NBA teams do. So it's going to need to be some consistency, some chip in efforts that are going to look different on a night in, night out basis. That's what I've loved the most about being among those better teams, is it's point down the bench and go, now you go make a bunch of shots. Now you go give us some scoring. Now you drive the paint. That's been really encouraging as well.
And you mentioned, field goal percentage being pretty high. They've, some of that's like Cam, and they've been able to get some good shots around the basket at times. They've just been overall efficient. I think you put an assist per game is going to be up there. Those are all kind of highly correlated, right? Like, you're going to have high offensive efficiency when you're sharing the ball and when you're making your shots, right? So having the points, the points, the assists, and the field goal percentage correlated together as higher ranking, like that all tracks, right? Like, you kind of need all those things to happen in order to have your efficiency get higher. I will say one thing is even impressive about some of the offensive efficiency. Sometimes those numbers are buoyed by, if you can get really easy shots at the basket. It's like you can make threes, and if you can get really easy shots at the basket, like if you have Jokic and Embiid and guys like this on your team, where you just have these like sort of elite offensive guys, basketball is just easier, right? It's easier when you're tall and when you're tall and near the rim. Like, those are the easiest shots.
Secret to success for the NBA.
I mean, kind of. That's why centers sometimes in some statistics get ranked probably a little higher than maybe even they should be, because the things they do, if you do it well, are going to get easier the closer you are to the basket. The Nets haven't even really had any guys like that on the team, right? Like, Simmons is basically their leading rebounder. Claxton's barely played. He's all ultra efficient around the rim, but he's been out. And so to not even have these like prototypical guys that help with some of these offensive metrics, or just like heliocentric dudes like Luka who just make everyone better and are massive elevators, it's even more impressive to have these numbers just when you look up and down at where the minutes have gone this season. Because if you go back 4 games, if we told you this is the minutes distribution for this team so far this year, anybody would have been like they're 0-4, right? Like there's no way. There's no way. It's so to have it even be like that has been impressive. I guess we could talk about the rebounds too.
Yeah, and just to drill down on it, we take away Day'Ron Sharpe, Ben Simmons, Trendon Watford with his first sample size in game number 4. In behind them, though, they have from Lonnie Walker, Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, Cam Thomas, and Dorian Finney-Smith. All of those players are from 48 to 55% from the field, taking away something that we'll discuss here in a second. We're going to get into the rebounding, but another key stat that when you see this type of field goal percentage, given the struggles by certain players from beyond the arc, it should again further illustrate that this team is still scratching the surface about the type of team they can be consistently, at both ends of the floor. We'll dive in on that coming up next.
All right, before we get into that, I'm going to tell you about our friends over on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made so easy. All you're doing on Prize Picks is you're picking different players, you're picking stats, you're going more or less than the Prize Picks projection. So you're not, trying to wrangle salaries together. You're not just trying to, mix and match all these different pieces to make sure they fit into one unique lineup. No, you're just taking more or less on the different numbers that Prize Picks has thrown out there. Maybe you know better. And sometimes, definitely in some cases, you're going to. It's just that easy. You put together, 2 to 5 different combinations. They've even hooked it up where you can have specials leagues where you can go across sports, because they got every sport on there, right? Just you'll go filter through all the different sports. You'll see everything's on there. But maybe you're trying to enjoy a little Sunday where there's going to be some hoops and NFL action. Put a specials together where you can combine some of that football with some of the basketball as well. All the things you love wrapped into one tidy little basket. Prize Picks has figured all this stuff out, made it really easy, took the most fun parts of fantasy and put it together. They even have a reboot policy. So your entries are going to stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. You're not going to find that. I believe me, I've been around these streets for a long time. You're not finding that anywhere else but Prize Picks. You go to prizepicks.com slash LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Let me just tell you this again. prizepicks.com slash LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy.
All right, so as we continue the conversation around how gosh darn good these Brooklyn Nets are, one of the other things that came to mind here as well in talking about a 50.1 field goal percentage, okay, that's great. But then you go in and you think about the three-point shooting, which we've talked about. And now when you look back and you say, well, Armani Brooks comes in and he's absolutely phenomenal, and you've been having a really good performance from Dorian Finney-Smith this season. Right now, he's at 48.1% from deep. But if I remind you that Mikal Bridges is shooting 31.6% from beyond the arc, that Cam Thomas is shooting just 30% from beyond the arc this season, that Cam Johnson in his one game has only gave you 25% on 1 of 4 from the field. Even Spencer Dinwiddie, he's had a good run, 44% for him. But the fact that 2 of the guys that you would have listed, and they've had good games in their own right, Cam Thomas had an excellent start to his season. The fact that Mikal Bridges and Cam Thomas are struggling from beyond the arc, and this team is still hitting at a high percentage. And if you go look at the NBA stats, their three-point shooting is not abysmal. It needs to improve. And they're scoring 118, 119 points per game. That could not be any more encouraging. I understand. I think your easy pushback would be, but you have gotten a 5 of 6 performance from Armani Brooks here. So things are getting skewed kind of healthy where they should be.
Yeah, I was joking. After the game, I was like, Cam Thomas and Mikal Bridges have each hit 6 3-pointers in 120 and 140 minutes, and then Armani hit 5 in 16 minutes.
By the way, Armani Brooks, who was told by an assistant coach, the reporter asked him afterwards, "Did you know you were a plus 30?" He goes, "No." One of the assistant coaches came up and told me, and he goes, "Man, that's nuts!" And in only 16 minutes, Armani Brooks was both shocked and pretty self-congratulatory.
They know, and they should be counting too, man. These guys, you got to count all these stuff. These two-way contracts, you never know. These guys are hanging by NBA threads, and so it's really awesome when they absolutely go up. No, look, they're getting a lot. This is why I said at the beginning, if we showed you the list of the guys who had gotten minutes, we would have had no qualms about going way under on the win total, because we're like, hey, it's gone way off the rails here. But they've gotten so much from these guys that it's awesome, because it's gonna come back with the shooting with Mikal. These guys are gonna round out some of their efficiency. It's just going to basketball almost, unless there's major injuries, kind of everyone regresses to their mean at some point. You just need enough time on the court, right? And sometimes it can take a little while. Sometimes the sample size needs to get, for some of the shooting and stuff. Some of the other things kind of get there a little quicker. But the shooting, sometimes it's going to take 10 games, 15 games, a lot of shots to get you all the way there. And I think because we know that Thomas and to more of a degree Mikal are going to play a lot of minutes for this team, you're not really worried about it. And there's a little concern that some of the FIBA guys have all come out a little slow. I heard Nate Duncan talking about this the other day, and I was thinking, oh yeah, maybe that is a lot of these FIBA guys maybe just was a lot of balling over the summer in a way that they're not used to, and maybe there's a little fatigue. I think that could be a little real, but also I'm not sure it totally continues.
Not for Cameron Johnson, he hasn't played. He's been mostly
injured. Okay. Well, so you can't.
Although the impact is that it's prevented him from playing at all, right?
You don't make all the shots you don't take, I suppose. But in general though, if a guy has shot a certain percentage for their career, short of something crazy happening one way or the other, they're going to come around to. I'm really not worried about that piece of it for those guys, really at all.
No, and the last one here for me, before we're going to turn our attention to some injury updates around the Friday night game, obviously, and it's the in-season tournament. And I genuinely do want Brooklyn Nets fans, I think NBA fans should be excited for this tournament as well. So we'll get into that. But the other one is the rebound category.
Yeah.
When you sit here and the Nets have 47.5 rebounds per game, they are sniffing being a top 6 team effectively, all the way up with the likes of Phoenix, New Orleans, and as you said, the Boston Celtics in many categories are just head and shoulders above everybody else at 52.3. We know that without Nicholas Claxton, again, this is the old, if you told me X, there's no way I would think Y. If you told me that Nicholas Claxton had missed 3 out of the 4 games for the Brooklyn Nets, I would be hard pressed to sit here and tell you, let alone if he had been healthy, I might have said, I don't know if they're a top 15, top 20 team in rebounds because they don't have the personnel. We mentioned this in the Miami postgame, this new team mentality about gang rebounding. And I think the presence maybe of that transition game and the pace of play they want to get into has at least given the opposition pause about overcommitting guys to crash the glass for second chance opportunities. And it's just yielded great results for them. This is something, by the way, out of all these things that has been surprising, and the Nets need to find a way to make sure this sticks. This is it. They need to find a way to keep themselves as a top 10-ish type of rebounding team and win the rebounding battles night over night, because I think that that's critical to them being able to win some of these close games. That Miami game, they don't come back if they're not winning the rebound battle in the second half of that game.
Yeah, I mean, Simmons has made a huge difference here. Like, we knew he was a good rebounder. We knew that it was going to, raise the overall rebounding floor just to have him in the mix. That part isn't known. He's been really one of the best rebounders per minute in basketball, though. Like, that is a little surprising to me. I did a little quick dive on this before, just looked at his per minute rebounding. His per minute rebounding this year, and it was like for guys who played real minutes, like 100, over 110 or 120 minutes. I think I filtered it by. He was, like, I think, sixth in the league in rebounds per minute, and everyone else above him was a dead true center. It was like Embiid, Jokic, Jonas Valanciunas, like guys that are just like no doubt about whether or not they're a center. I don't think there was any guy that didn't live within that filter above. And then there's Simmons. Mm-hmm. And if he's going to rebound like this, then yeah, they have a chance to just probably stick around this rate. Like, he is just that good of a rebounder. And you get, unlike those other guys, you get doubled up on the upside on that, because he's also a pace pusher also. So when he rebounds, you are already, seemingly starting your offense sort of a step ahead, because you don't need an outlet pass, and he can make the outlet pass, or he can just push the pace. This is actually why I actually always liked when guys like Russ or even Harden was pretty good about rebounding too. Like, when they would rebound, I just thought it's such an advantage to have guards that rebound really well, because you're already one step out the door in terms of getting up. Like, you're already one step ahead, right? As opposed to just having one of your big guys center, and then they're going to trail the play. They're always going to be behind. It's going to be hard to fast break with it, right? If you have a guard that can rebound, it just has a great double bottom line to it. So he's been great. More than 10 rebounds a game. The minutes aren't even crazy. Like I said, his per minute stats are great. And this is him plus these other guys all being like good at it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, once he's there, like Dorian Finney-Smith, he's been okay. Right. Like, there's Royce has even rebounded pretty well. It's all kind of working together.
Oh, yeah, and I was going to say, you go and look, I looked at a team like Toronto. Their top three rebounders are combined for 27 rebounds per game, and then you have some guys trickle down, so it's 8, 9, and 10 rebounds per game. When you get into the Brooklyn Nets, obviously Claxton's going to be listed up there, but it's just the one game with 7. So you sit there and look at 10.3 per game for Ben Simmons. Let's skip over Claxton for the moment. Royce O'Neal, 6.5. Guess what? That's a rebound and a half more than he averaged last year. 6 for Mikal Bridges. That's a rebound and a half than he was averaging last year. You mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith with 5.5. Day'Ron Sharpe in his very small minutes is still giving you 5.5 rebounds. So, and then Cameron Johnson again with 5. Like, that's what I think it really is critical here, and why we always talk about, they're instituting this new idea, this new, new scheme, this new fundamental. Well, we're going to be gang rebounding. And by the way, the Brooklyn Nets and the coaching staffs in years past have said some of the same things. Well, we're going to be everyone's team effort. Everyone's got to get in there. And then nobody really gets in there, and they get blown away, and there's second chance opportunities. And you're like, yeah, great. You talked about it, but there wasn't the results. This year so far, you are seeing especially the smaller guard play has stepped back into that area of the court and commanded getting that ball. And what I've loved about it is that you mentioned Ben Simmons is every single time, almost to a man, when Ben Simmons is on the court and he's not the guy that gets the rebound, getting that ball into his hands off of the rebound is about as quick as you can want the decision-making to be, because he's launching those three-quarter court passes. Or I'll use this last game as the example, and why Trendon Watford, who pitched in 4 rebounds in that game. Or you have an extra ball handler, a guy that himself, everybody wants to push this tempo. You saw it when Spencer Dinwiddie was healthy on the court. You saw it from Trendon Watford in that game. If you can ball handle and you can get that rebound, get out and start moving. So these things are so married to one another in terms of their successes. And I think if we see one of these things struggle, if we see an off game, you'll probably be able to connect all these little threads and say, why did 3-point shooting suffer a little in this game? Well, they didn't get the rebounds as much on the defensive glass, so the transition game wasn't there, so the open looks weren't possible, right? So I've been really impressed by it, man, and I hope that it carries over here when we think about a blend of 4 games that really does represent a sample size of quality opponents.
Sorry, I was muted there. Another thing that the other reason that this works out really well too, because like you think about the things that just drove us crazy last year, opponent's second chance points, which is a direct reflection of how well you're rebounding, right? When you can't rebound, the opponent's second chance points are just going to be there aplenty, which they have been against that's in the past, and that's ranked 25th. That's in a bad way, right? 25th in opponent's second chance points. This year they've moved themselves up to 12th. Like that is a noticeable difference, and it's because they're getting on the glass more, and there's just not as few opportunities, right? We talked about this, like when they're not switching onto the smaller guards with Claxton, like those were rebounding chances that were just too easy for the teams last year. They don't have as many of those guys this year in those switching schemes to just get brutalized on the switch on the bigs, and it's really helping. So we'll get into the in-season tournament here stuff in a second. We'll get into the injury news as well. We'll get into that here in 1 second. Before we do that, tell you about our friends over on FanDuel. You're going to score early this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. It's $150 if your team wins. Now, if you were here the other day, you know that over on FanDuel, we were giving out the money line bet on the Nets over the Heat. And probably at halftime, you're not feeling so great about that one. That's okay. You're going to get a second chance at this bad boy when they take on the Bulls on Friday against Chicago over on FanDuel. Right now, the Nets are, let me have it here, plus 150 on that money line. Plus 4. Sorry. Plus 4 on the spread. This is what we're talking about with these money line bets over on FanDuel. Now, it's not just there. They got spreads, player props, over-unders, so much more. You're going to grab that $150 if your team wins. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Kick off the season now. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we continue to wrap up our Locked On Nets episode, talking about some of the key stats that have really helped the Brooklyn Nets get to 500. Maybe they could have been 4-0. Listen, we don't worry about the past. We glide ever so gracefully into the future. And remind everybody, by the way, that when the Nets go to Chicago, I should say, to take on the Bulls at 8 p.m. tonight, you can go ahead and head over to SiriusXM, search Nets, and get in on all the game action. That's over on the SiriusXM app, search Nets. All right. The last thing here is first quickly, or not so quickly, but questionable for the game as of the time of this recording on Thursday night. Dinwiddie, left ankle sprain. Smith Jr., left hip contusion. But beyond that, we know that Claxton will be out with the ankle sprain. Cam Johnson will be out with the left calf strain. We know it's a reevaluation 10-day for him. And then Clowney and Whitehead just listed on their G League assignment, along with Keon Johnson, who the Nets officially signed a two-way, but he'll be in the G League as well. Do you feel like, what is your pressure point on? We know the reevaluation for Cameron Johnson, but like, I kind of want to get Spencer Dinwiddie into the mix of this, because I feel like the balance that comes back to these rotations and the little bit of alleviation of pressure on saying Armani Brooks to go, now do it again. Now go 5 for 6 again. You want to get one of these players back, and the other one being Dennis Smith Jr. even, you can get some defensive value there too.
Yeah, you want your good players back. I mean, that's not like a difficult equation to try to just.
You want them? You want better or less? More.
I know that people sometimes have a love-hate relationship with guys like Dinwiddie. I've always been a little confused by that, but okay. But regardless, like he is an important piece to them. He's a really super versatile guy, and they're desperate sort of for another ball handler too. They just really do need one. I know these guys have really played well, but they really have limited ball handling up and down the roster. We've seen it at times too, like when they're having trouble getting it over, half court, like multiple times last night late in the game against the Heat. They have to take Simmons off the court in these late game sequences sometimes because of the foul shooting. And when that happens, like they're really without Dinwiddie, they are kind of under it here in terms of guys who can really handle the ball. So I don't think there's desperate to get him back, but I think it's been pretty glaring when he's not around, because you really kind of need one of him and Simmons on the court a lot. Really, and they work well together too. So of those guys, I'd really like to get him back. I'm hoping it's going to be quick. I think you said he's listed. PR said he's listed questionable for tomorrow, right? I wonder if that's questionable closer to doubtful, because sometimes when these guys are ruled out, like he was ruled out
very early ahead of the Miami,
well in advance of the game. And I don't know. Sometimes maybe it's a little tea leavy, but I followed this injury stuff for a long time, and sometimes the timing matters. And if it's like way in advance, it just means they're not that close. And I just do wonder if he's not that close. And we already know with Cam, we're in a reevaluation standpoint. And it looks like Claxton tracking for Saturday. So we'll see. We'll see how some of this goes.
That being the case, the last thing we want to close out on is something that I don't understand why, if you are someone that covers the NBA, and I've heard a lot of people talk about it, who say, talk to me in a decade about the in-season tournament. That's when we'll know whether or not fans care about it and whether or not it's successful. Well, you know how you help it make it matter and be successful is talk about it mattering and being successful now. Like the Nets come into Friday night against Chicago. It'll be their first in-season tournament game. They're going to have a few of these. Basically, they'll all be the group stage done by the end of November. So they'll start with Chicago tomorrow night or Friday night when you're hearing this. Then Friday the 10th, they'll take on the Celtics. They'll also have the Magic on the 14th. And then all the way at the end of November, they'll get the Raptors. Now, just from a pure basketball standpoint and season record, the Nets need to beat the Chicago Bulls. The first 4 games tell you that they can go against teams like this and they can get the wins. So even regardless of some of the injury concerns, need to go get the win. Also, from a team standpoint that is not necessarily destined for a deep playoff run as we see them right now, you can put an incredibly strong foot forward by beating Chicago and getting the win before you eventually play Boston inside of this group stage as well. I want fans to be excited about this, even if the courts are heinous. And by the way, the Nets are going to be rocking a very upsetting like city uniform this season. And these two things together is borderline visually unpalatable. Nevertheless, you should. I got
non-Nets fans that texted me about the those uniforms. It was like a group chat that I'm in with other guys, and they're not Nets fans. Like they're just kind of like sort of tangential NBA fans, and they sent me pictures of those Nets uniforms, and it was yeah. And you know me, buddy. I'm like not colorblind, but it's like whatever is right next to colorblind. And even I was like, whoa. very, very upsetting. Very upsetting.
Yeah. So they will be in Chicago for this one. And actually, Chicago's version of the in-season tournament court just looks better because it's red and then like an off tone of red. So it actually isn't the worst in the world. But do you agree? I mean, do you care about the in-season tournament? Like we talked about this in the off season. I just think that when you look back on this after the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, every year, and I come from a soccer background, there's always a team that wins the league and then a team that wins an in-season tournament. And that comes with cachet. It comes with accolades. In the NBA's instance, it comes with more money for these players. So this team uniquely, for a lot of these guys, actually is probably positioned to really want to get these because a lot of them will see a nice little bump in their paycheck if they get out of the group stage and make some noise.
I just don't know why it pays to not to complain about it. Like that's the one that I'll never really understand.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll just never understand. I can understand not loving it, but then just don't care about it. Like there's no reason to lobby a complaint at all. Yes. That makes no sense to me. The games are the games. A couple teams are going to play extra games. That sounds fun to me. I'm pro more basketball. I'm anti less basketball. So like I'm pro more games maybe counting. And look, we've already seen one thing. I know there was like some complaints, but we're already seeing that those rules around the stars playing, like that's starting to work. Like Kawhi and PG just play back-to-backs. Those guys haven't played back-to-back since like my first kid was born. It doesn't feel like it's like it feels forever. Embiid played out back-to-back. Like Booker's pushing to get back. Like I think it is kind of working. They were questionable, but these guys are kind of playing. So if the in-season tournament can just be part of this push to just get these guys playing more, because newsflash, that's the goal. Like, let's just go for it, right? Like, I don't see any reason to complain about it.
And the last thing I'll make a note about why it can matter for Brooklyn as well is for Mikal Bridges, a guy that wants to take that next leap forward. I think games like these will matter. I think you actually influence the idea of all-star status and where you are in the pecking order. And then for Cam Thomas, who's already vaulted himself over several guys in terms of most improved, in terms of sixth man, all those things. For him, like he can stake a claim at the end of this year, like, hey, not only what I did all season long, but in the in-season tournament, which is the closest thing that we could get to like high leverage basketball relative to, deep playoff runs, Cam Thomas can say, oh, also go look. I stepped up here. Ben Simmons can say this. I haven't been healthy in 2 years. Watch me go lead my team in these in-season tournaments. So I think there's just going to be a certain group of teams that view these games as being that much more valuable, and it's going to make it more fun. We're talking about game number 5, and you're going to see a level of intensity that you usually don't get until the Christmas Day games sometimes. And it folds right into what you said. These guys having to play, stars having to play more. Guess what? Once they're on the court, they take it as seriously as they always do. So it's just making, I think, everything a little bit ratcheted up more because you're getting more star-on-star battles.
Exactly. And again, I'll just go back to my original point before we get out of here. I'll just never understand why you would not like it. I just don't. That is my biggest. I can never hear the parts like, well, it's dumb. Well, who cares then? Just shut up and do something else. Like the part where you complain about it is the part that never makes sense to me. That's why I've been very consistent with that aspect. I think we both are. It's like, okay, you don't like it. Go down the road and do something else then. And let people that like watching basketball go see if they're going to like it. Because the part where it's like, well, I don't think it's going to work. Well, it could. I don't, who knows? Like, I just, if you find yourself saying things like, it's not going to matter. It can matter if we make it matter. It can matter if we try to make it matter, right? Like, it's not going to work. Well, there's a wide range for what that even means. Like, I'll just never understand the part where people just get mad about it. They just say try to be happier in your life. These things are not, we're not splitting the atom here. It's basketball.
My favorite thing is when I get Doug just a little bit tweaked on something. And usually it comes down to things like this. Don't be so black and white. Doug doesn't appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's we're gonna get a hard time limit here, and we're about to go over it because now I'm the one. Like I have a very, very hard deadline to get out of here.
Wrap if you want, Doug. Wrap if you want.
Good job by Adam getting me just percolating right before the end. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Make sure you are both on YouTube and on the podcast feed wherever you listen to podcasts. We're doing special episodes on both. Pre-game stuff over on the podcast feed and post-game stuff over on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast and over on YouTube. Also join subtext.com/LockedOnNets. Just get onto the text in action with Adam and I all day long, talking Brooklyn Nets basketball.
If we knew what we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? That's Bertie Einstein.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. RIP. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.